So in last class, we discussed the solutions to the environmental problems are basically the externalities. And again, remember that we are discussing all the solutions in a very formal setting. We can also discuss the regulations in an informal setting also. So after completing the discussion on this formal solutions, we'll go to the informal solutions also. Okay. Now, in last class, okay, we discussed the solution first comes from Arthur Cecil Vigo, that if there is externality, then we can impose tax and correct the problem. And the tax could be positive or negative, because if there is a negative externality where the polluter produces more than what is socially desirable level, we need to discourage such production, and that is why we impose a tax. Similarly, if it is a good which has positive externality and we need to promote such productions or consumption, then we can subsidize, okay, or we can impose a negative tax on such commodities, because the market will produce less than what society desires for. So subsidy helps in increasing the production and consumption of the goods that has positive externality. Then came Coase, Ronald Coase. Coase says that you held someone accountable. Okay? If you can give property right, then if the negotiation can take place without much transaction cost between two parties, then they can also arrive at a solution. Okay? So the regulator's job would be to assign the property right. It doesn't matter who gets property right, whether the polluter or the victim. The efficiency remains same. You can achieve the same objective. The equity implication would be different if you assign the property right to someone. But then, if so far as efficiency is concerned, the pollution regulation is concerned, you can achieve both ways. It doesn't matter whether the polluter gets the ownership over the resource or the victim gets the ownership over the resource. And then came the command and control approach. And in command and control approach, we have discussed that we are setting different standards, and then we are monitoring, enforcing, imposing penalty, asking them to shut down, or if needed, we are incentivizing some producers to produce something, or in certain cases, we put a complete ban on the production and consumption of certain goods. That is a command and control approach. So we have discussed the shortcomings of a taxation yesterday in details. Like when you try to impose a positive or negative tax, basically the Pigou-Van solution, then we have discussed all the challenges. Similarly, we can also discuss the challenges within a command and control framework. In a command and control framework, what happens? Basically, setting the standard. Okay, first of all, this command and control approach is criticized as a very stringent measure. Okay, it is a very stringent measure compared to the other tools, because in a command and control approach, you are setting standard, and the industries or the parties who fall in line will able to operate. Otherwise, you ask them to shut down, okay, or you impose penalty. So if you are doing that, you are say, like I was telling that in last class, that if somebody really violates the standard and you immediately ask them to shut down, then production is affected. Then it can affect the supply of inputs, commodities in the market. It can affect the employment, income, and so on. So that is why it will have severe impact, okay, on the economy. But in case of and other tools or cap and trade that we are going to discuss today, these are a little flexible, because you are giving them time that, okay, if you are violating, you can You can pay the tax or you can pay the penalty, and you take 5 to 10 years in which, or the required time framer, and then if you can replace the technology and you can adopt the clean technology method, then problem is solved. Okay, so that is other tools are quite flexible, but command and control approach is not flexible. But then the problem here is also, in case of command and control approach, we always find that the monitoring and enforcement remains very, very weak. So if you look at India's pollution control or pollution management, be it water, air, or anything, we have very good legislations. But when it comes to the enforcement and the implementation or monitoring, then we fail miserably, because we have shortage of the staff, we have shortage of the technical know-how, and that's how most of the time the violations happen. And similarly, the political economic framework also, you can see that since the industries have strong lobbies over the political parties, you can see that, because big industries would be financing the political parties, and when they come to the power, then it becomes very difficult for the political parties to enforce such stringent rules and regulations. Okay? In fact, a very famous IS officer of Odisha, who is known for his honesty, he was in fact IS topper. Okay? And his name is Rishikesh Panda, but his interview is also available on YouTube channels. You can see that he was always given not so very high profile positions because of his honesty only. And then once he was given this Minister of Department of Environment and Forest, and then he has said this in his interview, that once he wanted to visit the industries in Odisha and see the environmental performance. Okay, so in a weekend he started his journey, and he visited many industries from in different districts, and he saw many violations taking place. Nobody is following the rules and the standard that is set. So then uh, he basically warned them at the location, and then said that you will all get notification notice here to shut down by the time I reach office. So by the time he reaches office, he has been transferred to another department. Okay, he is not present there. Okay, so that means the regulator becomes very, very weak for the political parties. You see that, so the priorities are different, since there is strong lobby working. It's not in Odisha; it's working everywhere. You see that enforcement is very. Otherwise, we have very good environmental legislations in our country. So how can somebody pollute? And we have pollution control boards, we have regulator, we have legislations, we have enforcement agencies also. But unfortunately, we see that the enforcement remains very, very weak. Okay, so these are the merits and demerits. And merit would be that it's very easy to implement. Command and control approach is very easy. Okay, because unlike in the taxation, we see that it is so complicated. We have to face a lot of challenges. But command and control approach is very clear, very simple. Okay, but it is also very much rigid from the producer perspective, because it doesn't allow the flexibility to adapt a new technology. It should give enough time. Okay. Okay. So these are the merits and demerits of command and control instrument. Then comes the tradable pollution permits. Now, what is this tradable pollution permits? First of all, to know that, okay, for this we have to decide the optimal level of pollution. In fact, for optimal level of pollution, we will have a specific class, a special lecture will be there on optimal pollution. But just remember that when you go for a tradable pollution permits, how the market operates, that we have to decide. Now, suppose a country decided the optimal level of pollution, say at 100 tons of carbon emission per year, that is allowed. Okay, because looking at your other, looking at the capacity of your biosphere or the biodiversity, remember that in fact Dasgupta review report says that if your biodiversity is rich, then the absorption capacity of the nature would also be higher. It can absorb lot of shocks, but as you degrade your biodiversity, you will not be able to absorb all these pollutions. So it will vary depending on your pollution, population density, your ecosystem, biodiversity, and so on. You decide your optimal level of carbon emission per year. Now that will be auctioned. Okay, so now suppose you decided that we'll allow 100 tons of carbon emission to happen in a year, and this can be sold among 10 uh, 10 parties. Okay, polluters, we can say, can be sold among sorry 10, not 10, 100 parties, so that each producer gets 1 ton of rights to pollute. And remember that, but the producers are more than 100. It's not that we have only 100 producers. You are allowing 100 tons of carbon emission, and you are fixing the number also, that in a year only 100 tons can be allowed, and then 100 rights will be sold. Okay, and or yeah, 100 rights will be sold in the market. But then in the market there are so many producers. There would be thousands or multiple thousands of producers. Okay, or we can take a hypothetical case. Now when your rights are limited, but the demand for these rights are very high, obviously the best tool would be going for auction. So you auction these rights, so that, okay, you can also fix a best price, that the industries who would be allowed to produce 1 ton of carbon dioxide in a year will have to pay, say, 1,000 rupees. That is the best price. Okay, and then we are opening the auction. Okay, and then in the auction, now the farms will bid for it, because so many people will be polluting, and so the industries that are polluting, or even clean industries, would also be basically buying these through auction measures. Okay, and now whoever pays the highest price will be issued the license to pollute 1 ton. Now it may so happen that the industries that could get these auctions, yeah, for pollution rights might be the large industry, because they can only pay good price. Okay, the highest price can be paid by the large industry. And so the large industries might be clean industries, might be polluting industries also. Now suppose one industry is a very clean industry. Okay, and but he has got the right to pollute 1 ton of carbon emission. So per year, an industry or a firm can pollute 1 ton of carbon dioxide. But then that industry is very clean. Okay, suppose that industry is generating only say 0.10 ton of carbon dioxide, but you are allowed to pollute 1 ton. Okay, that means you still have 0.9 ton of carbon emission. You can pollute that much, but you are not polluting because you have adopted clean technology and you are a very responsible producer. So you are performing very good. You are over complying basically with the standard. Okay, and but there could be many other industries who could not buy this license. Okay, or there could be industries who could buy this license, but they are polluting more than this. So there are certain industries who got the right to pollute for 1 ton, but they might be polluting 3 tons of carbon dioxide. So in that case, they will be looking for some other firms who are having this surplus. Like the example I gave, that one farm is having surplus of 0.09 ton of carbon, and but other farm is requiring this. So this industry who is having the farm who has the surplus, he can sell this right to the person who needs this. Okay, and again the price, because so many people will be demanding this, so there will be competitive pricing. In fact, you can again go for another auction. Okay, and so then you you can then you basically get the highest rate. In fact, this bidding process is reflected in the diagram, that you fix the benchmark that in 2010, okay, quantity, actually how much you are fixing, carbon emission, you are imposing very stringent condition. Then the blue line is the original demand curve. Supply is limited, but the demand is there. So then you determine the price. And okay, so you can go back to 2012 first, and that means you are little liberal, and then you are becoming stringent. Okay, so initial equilibrium, you see that more pollution and less price, and at a later stage you are improving the standard. You are basically reducing the level of pollution to a limited amount, and then demand is also higher, the prices go up. Okay, so now in this process, what is happening, since it is a very competitive market, the firms are demanding for this. Now, how does it help to minimize the pollution? Since it involves money, now the firms that are polluting would be paying the money to somebody else to get this license. Otherwise, if there is a regulatory measure, then the industry will be shut down. If you are not able to buy the rights, then you can't pollute. Okay, so you'll be asked to basically shut down. Now, some industries are able to do that. So, of course, it gives flexibility in the sense that as long as you are polluting, you will have to buy this right for annum. You pay money to somebody else. But then in the long run, you will always aim to come to the list of the compliant farms, so that you also sell these rights and you can make money. Okay, by complying this, first of all, okay, you are incurring expenditure to regulate your pollution level, but then once you regulate, you are now generating surplus, or you are generating rights to pollute, so that can be sold in the market and you will get money. Okay, so there will be always an incentive for the producer to reduce the level of product pollution. So if now there is a competition among the firms to reduce the level of pollution, then overall in the society, pollution level will go down. Okay, so this is a very no flexible approach, we can say. And in fact, but operationalization is not that easy. Okay, again, it's very theoretical concept. But remember that in the world, we have implemented, in fact, this cap and trade, or this is called as tradable pollution permits, or cap and trade. Why this is cap and trade? You are capping the number of, first of all, amount of pollution, and the number of polluters, and you are going for the auction. So it's a cap and trade option. And then emission permits also, you say, because you are allowing the farms to pollute certain amount, and then you are charging money for. So what is ultimately happening? Now that the externality problem, we used to say that, if you remember the definition of externality, that anything that you produce, okay, you are producing certain good, but you are also producing something else which does not have a market. Now that component is no more external, that has been internalized, because that carbon has a price now. Okay, now when you pay a price for it, you will be responsible. Okay, you will behave responsibly and try to minimize the level of pollution. So that's how ultimately this is happening. And now, if you look at the real life example, then now only in European Union we have this carbon trading market. India, in fact, this cap and trade or tradable pollution permits, basically started as under the Kyoto Protocol framework. We shall discuss in a separate class what is that Kyoto Protocol and how this tradable pollution permits happen. And so now there is only one agency. In fact, under UNEP, if you see, or under Kyoto Protocol, there is a provision for Clean Development Mechanism, CDM. Now, under CDM, this cap and trade happens. That means the developed countries that have already polluted too much, okay, and are still polluting too much. Why I'm saying this? Because if you look at the per capita resource consumption, anything that you compare, then the developed countries consume almost 10 times the resource compared to the developing countries. If you look, say, you can just make a Google search. Now, what is the per capita energy consumption in India, and what is the per capita energy consumption in America? Then you will find in almost everything what is the per capita consumption of steel in India, what is the per capita consumption of steel in America, including your fish, food, anything. Okay, they consume huge amount of resources. Okay, anything that you can think of. So when you consume more resource, obviously you will also pollute more, right? Or you cause more damage to the environment. So that is why under the Kyoto Protocol, it was decided that the developed countries have already done more damage, and that is why they have to be responsible, and they have to compensate, they have to pay a price for this. And how can this happen? In most of the cases, the developing countries are now lacking resources, so you can't impose on them basically to go for these kind of strict environmental measures. That's why and a Kyoto Protocol, it was discussed that the developed countries should also transfer the technology to the developing countries. But since at this point of time we are discussing the tradable pollution permits, now these are operate under Kyoto Protocol. The developed countries were asked to operate this market so that money can flow from the developed country to the developing countries. Now, how will money flow? Now, in a real life example, in fact, okay, so let me discuss this and then we'll go to the real life example. Now, coming to the strengths and weaknesses of this tradable pollution permits or cap and trade, we see that okay, it creates incentive to reduce pollution. It creates a clear price for internalizing the cost, and then it sets a clear limit on the quantity of pollution. And price of permits can be increased over time by reducing the number of permits available that I have shown in the diagram. And in the weaknesses, we see that the price is okay, the price of the permits is determined by the free market and maybe too low sometimes also to create strong incentives to reduce pollution. And the amount of, see, sometimes they can go for a capital also. The polluters will do a fixing that we will not bid for a very high price. So price remain low, and then you see that it doesn't have much impact on the pollution control. And then the amount of permits is decided by the government and maybe too high if polluting industries are allowed to influence policy. See here, we said that okay, 100 tons, and then only 100 users are allowed. But then what if you allow too many permits? Then there will be no competition, and the prices will be again very low. And like in this diagram, we see that you keep the bar in the right side, so that even if demand is very high, prices remain low because you are very liberal or lenient, you can say. And it is very costly and difficult to monitor industries to make sure everyone who pollutes has the permit to do so. Okay. So because there are so many industries and you have to monitor everything, starting from any industry nowadays, you have to get clearance from Minister of Environment and Forest. But then if you go to implement this also and you have to monitor them, then it becomes again too much of administrative responsibility. So these are the strengths and weaknesses of the cap and trade or tradable pollution permits or emission permits. Now coming to the real life example, this is this stadium that I was telling, that under Kyoto Protocol we have a clean development mechanism under which the European Commission basically at present, or the developed countries, will transfer the money to the developing countries. And this lady young IS officer, Aditya Garg, who is the CEO at Indore Smart City Development Limited, basically she basically saved. Okay, how to do this? Let me give the example, and then you can understand. So in developing countries, now you are trying to implement a project. Okay, and in a project you are proving that through the implementation of your new project you are reducing the carbon emission. Now suppose if you go business as usual, then you would contribute this x quantity of carbon emission to the existing load. But if you adopt a clean technology and you estimate that by adopting a clean technology, you are now reducing the carbon emission, which is normal. Okay? So then suppose to adopt the existing technology or the normal business as usual technology, then suppose X industry would generate say 10 or say 1 ton of carbon. But if you adopt a clean technology, your project will be expensive. But then you are reducing the carbon emission to say 0.5 ton. That means half a ton of carbon is now minimized. The load on the planet is now minimized. And by doing that, now you can go to the European markets, this CDM, clean development mechanism, or carbon market, and you can say that okay, for unit of carbon, how much money will be. Okay, and then the Aditya Garg, the CEO of Smart City Indore, could actually get. So she proved that she mitigated 1.7 lakh tons of carbon, and that's how she got crores of rupees. The exact amount I don't remember now. This is given in this link. I'll share the link with all of you. And so she got carbon credits from 3 eco-friendly projects that mitigated 1.7 lakh tons of carbon dioxide. Okay, so like this, in fact, I remember correctly, then some time ago, a few years ago, Bombay Municipal Corporation also had implemented this project of Aditya Garg, or CEO of Indore Smart City, is about the management of the sewage. Okay, the sewage of Indore city has been now processed properly scientifically, so that it doesn't pollute water, and that's how we can get the rights. Okay, you prove that okay, we are helping basically reducing the carbon emissions. Similarly, again in Bombay Municipal Corporation, I think a couple of years ago, also had taken up a project like how to manage the dump, waste dump sites in a scientific manner, so that you basically minimize the pollution. Basically, what they had done was that even from the waste dump sites, you get a lot of chemical waste, and then that also gets into the water bodies through the groundwater table it gets into, and then it pollutes water, and then similarly people put fire on the waste, and then that causes a lot of methane gas emission and so on. So they had developed a mechanism to process this waste scientifically, and they proved that we are helping reducing the carbon emission, and they had also got some carbon credit. But yes, if you see its efficiency, then no, it is not actually operating fully, because system plan development mechanism, it is not functioning fully. Particularly, all the developed countries had agreed initially. America, Japan, and all OECD countries had agreed to do that. But then most of the countries have now withdrawn, including America, Canada, Japan. Most of the countries have withdrawn from CDM. So it is only the European Union that is still operating, and some developing countries are able to get some funds from. Okay, so with this we conclude the tools of the formal regulatory mechanism to minimize the pollution. And then we will move to the couple of things. One is that we have to discuss the informal regulation, which is after this we have to discuss the optimal level of pollution, and we have to also discuss okay, CDM, optimal level of pollution, and informal. Okay, so Kyoto Protocol, then optimal level of pollution, and informal regulation. Okay, so I will stop here.